Afternoon, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to the July meeting of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. It's nice to be back in Salem in person for the first time since 2020. I don't know why, but the room just feels so much more formal to me now than it used to. I guess the difference between this room and taking meetings from my TV, my room at home is very different. But it's great to be back here. We have a really nice agenda today, and between myself here in Salem and Lisa on screen there with you will be co-facilitating through the agenda. If just kind of the quick glance is we have a great opportunity to hear from some of our current OOST grant recipients from the ocean acidification and hypoxia work. We're going to take a little break and then we're going to come back and talk about our action plan and capacity building funds that we've received to get that going. And I'm pretty sure that we will be on time today. I don't see any reason why not. So with that, I'd like to do a round of introductions. We will start with board members in person to my right and left, and then we'll jump to board members online, and then we'll do a quick intro from all members of the public as well.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Marks. I am a board member of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, great. Oh, there we are. I'm Karina Nielsen, and I am also a member of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust and also director of Oregon Sea Grant. Great to be here.
And voting board members online, Christine and then Christina.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Christina Volniakovsky. I'm a board member, and I apologize I'm off screen, but I have very little bandwidth where I am.
It's possible we're not getting audio.
Huh. Okay.
Christina, I read your introduction thanks to closed captioning, but I think we need to get the audio portion working here locally.
And Christina,
and good to know that online you're getting audio. Let's continue with introductions, and I think those of us in the room can read. We'll continue on then with the voting board, please.
Hi, this is Christine Moffett. I'm a board member and Coos Bay resident.
It's a
The audio settings usually there's
Like I can't see the.
Did that audio work?
Speaker, perhaps. Maybe same as system, possibly.
Looks like it's working online anyway. I don't know about the room.
All right, we're hearing you all now. I presume we made it through Christina and Christina's introductions.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say I'm in super rural Oregon and there's very little bandwidth here. So I'll do the best I can joining the meeting and the discussion.
Thank you, Christina. It's good to have you. We also have our esteemed Representative Gomberg, a non-voting member. Sir, if you want to just acknowledge.
good afternoon, everyone. David Gomberg, State Representative, as you heard, a non-voting member of the trust. And I apologize to all of you because my video is working. And Chair Anderson, do you have an owl in the room? Because for those of us watching online, we've just got a very distant view of the entire room, and it just looks like little tiny figures up in the corner.
Yeah, I saw that, and I am not aware of where the I think the cameras are located in the upper corners of the room. Yeah. Mhm. So I assure you that myself and Dr. Nielsen and Steve Marks haven't changed much since you saw us last. Let's go ahead and do introductions online, and if you want to go ahead and take your turns, or I can call out names if that gets confusing.
I think you should call.
Call names, she said. All right, let's go with, we're gonna do members of the public, and then I'll also introduce staff. So we'll do Leaf, Nancy, and Dick first in that order.
Hi, I'm Leif Rasmussen. I work for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Marine Fisheries Research Project, and I'm also the new co-chair of the Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council. So that's mostly why I'm here, is in that role.
Great.
Hi, I'm Nancy Hotchkiss, and I'm in Baltimore, not on the West Coast. I am one of the partners with Pathways Collaborative, and we'll be reporting on the work we've been doing for a communications plan about OAH.
Dick, you might be on mute. Okay. Dick,
How about
take
that?
a- There you are.
Good. My headphones were not working, which has not been the case recently. I'm Dick Vanderschaft with the Nature Conservancy. I'm calling in from the North Coast. I work on marine issues and pertaining to Ocean Science Trust. I just today and the other day, I was swapping out the ocean acidification sensors at Cascade Head and Cape Falcon Marine Reserves. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Bill, Cinnamon, and Greg.
Hi, Bill Davis, just an interested member of the public, not sure how this got on my radar, but when it did, I said I want to sit in and kind of learn more about the Oregon Ocean Science Trust.
Fantastic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cinnamon Moffett. I'm the Research Program Manager at Hatfield Marine Science Center, and I will be presenting one of our projects today.
Oh, here I am. Okay. I'm Greg McMurray. I'm a retired oceanographer, did a fair amount of research and work with policy and management off the Oregon coast.
Great. And that leaves Scott and Sean, please.
Hello, Scott Groth, ODFW Newport, and I manage a section that includes fish research and shellfish and marine habitat and offshore renewable energy stuff and a lot of adjacent stuff. So just listening in.
And we have Sean. Having mic issues over here. Okay. Looks like we have Charlie just jumping on. Charlie, you're next up on introductions. Welcome.
Hey, I was totally not expecting to introduce myself right now. Charlie Flyman, Oregon Policy Manager. I don't know what we're adding to that little introduction. I live on the central coast of Oregon, and thanks for having me here today.
Man who needs no introduction, truly. Let's add on Caitlin, and then we'll try to see if Sean's available.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Caitlin Moggle. I'm a researcher at University of Washington's Puget Sound Institute.
Great, welcome. And Sean, did you get your audio? He's with the Oregon State Marine Board, interested party to gain some information. Thank you. And in the room, we have one member of the public.
Hi, I don't know if you folks can hear me. My name is Jenny Kester.
Can you hear Jenny in the audience? Looks like no. Step on up. Oh, there you go.
That's easy. Hi, my name is Jenny Kester. I'm staff to the Oregon Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council, and I am employed by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thanks.
Fantastic. And we have our wonderful administrative assistant here from DSL. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda. Oregon Department of State Lands.
It's Linda Safina Massey. She makes the magic happen. Thank you, Linda. And then Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself? And I think we've gone around.
Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Debricare, and I provide enthusiastic administrative support for the Oregon Ocean Science Trust.
That is true. Always enthusiastic. Great. Thank you for the introductions, everyone. Let's go ahead on to approval of previous meeting summary, and then we'll ask for some legislative updates. There are two summaries for our approval from January. And then our strategic planning summary from April.
I move that we approve the minutes from the two meetings.
Second.
All right, first and seconded, all in favor, voting members, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. And Representative Gomberg, would you regale us with some interesting stories from the last few months in Salem?
Not while we're being recorded. Well, thank you for that opportunity. Yes, our legislative session for 2023, the long session, which includes budgeting, just concluded last Sunday afternoon. And for the final 42 days of the session, things were bottled up a little bit because the Senate was not convening. So their committees were operating and sending measures to the floor, but the floor was not convening. So when they finally got back into action about a week before adjournment, there were more than 300 bills bottled up, and they moved through that process at lightning speed. I'm glad that they got things done. They certainly passed some measures that I thought were particularly important, as well as our state budget. But I don't know that that shoveling bills through the process at about 3 to 4 minutes each is the best way for a democracy to demonstrate itself. Nonetheless, we got through the process, closed out on Sunday. I think the important topic that we might want to spend some time on, either now or at the end of the agenda, regards the status and future of our Oregon Marine Reserves. And we had introduced legislation to try and expand support for the reserves. That legislation did not move forward. In the normal budgeting process, they ended up actually reducing reserve support by one position. Now, this gets a little tricky because the position that they eliminated had been vacant for more than 30 months, either because of difficulty in hiring during COVID or because of hiring freezes at the department. But and so it's not unusual for our budgeting committees to eliminate positions that have been vacant. On the other hand, we also understand that the way the measure was originally written, creating our Marine Reserves 10 years ago, it indicated that if there was to be a reduction in support, that could have consequences to the actual standing future of our reserves. Now, the governor's office promises me there is no problem. The department promises me that they'll provide the support to keep the reserves moving forward. But some of us still have some dire concerns about the actual effect of these budgeting changes or the image consequences of reducing support for the reserves. And Chair Anderson, with your approval, I'd like to ask Charlie if he'd like to add anything to my commentary there. Charlie, I'm putting you on the spot, but I also know that you are well-versed and well up to speed and can fill us in on your perspective. I'll just simply tell you that I have some concerns. We got through the process. I am now trying to line up a sit-down meeting with the governor's team and some interested reserve advocates to make sure that we've got some clear communication on where we go from here.
By all means, Representative Charlie, can you give us a brief synopsis of where you see this and maybe more to the point for our meeting, how OOST perhaps is in a position to do something for marine reserves here?
Thanks. Whether or not OOST is in a position to do something for marine reserves, I don't know. I think generally speaking, there's a failure at the highest levels in Oregon to appreciate investments in our ocean programs. And I think it goes beyond marine reserves. And I think it's our work to do a better job of trying to highlight the interest of ocean sciences, but also the agency management and the community engagement that's necessary to manage our oceans and to really support future generations' enjoyment of the resources that we enjoy today. I mean, everything from poor land use to position reductions all threaten some really grave things that we all care about and value in Oregon. And so I think Representative Gomberg sort of said it well, and that, this attrition of programs starts with one, but that makes it really easy to take away another and another. In defense of the Marine Reserve Program, that position was not vacant for 30 months. It looked like it was vacant because they didn't go through the DAS process of hiring somebody. They used Sea Grant Fellows. The reason they used Sea Grant Fellows was that they were under a hiring freeze for 2 of those years. And then the budget was on the 10% reduction list. And so generally with those sort of threats, and when you're trying to write a synthesis report for a decade-long program to report to the legislature, it was easier to fill those positions with Sea Grant Fellows, who I think did an outstanding job. Certainly we would want the continuity of an individual in that position the entire time, but I think that's an important message, that we didn't just save a bunch of money for 3 years and not hire that position. And it's not like that wasn't a needed service that the agency was providing. That service was never not provided. It now will not be provided. So we will see how the impact results in communities. The statute that Representative Gomberg mentioned is only in play if somebody puts it in play, I think. We've done a lot of work over the past 10 years, I think, to build the goodwill of the Marine Reserve Program. I think the Marine Reserve and the agencies has done a fantastic job of establishing and building relationships. To continue those relationships, we need to continue those investments. And so I'm excited at looking at opportunities for how we do that and moving forward. And I agree, working with leadership, particularly in the governor's office and at the top at ODF&W, and learning how we prioritize conservation programs for our ocean and science, I think is what's necessary. So I'll hop off of my platform in 3 minutes there.
All right, thank you, Charlie. And Representative, we will have an opportunity to talk about this in the context of OOST work when we get to our action plan. We have some specific things around communication and outreach at this higher level of highlighting the interest of ocean science to the public, to legislatures, and to others. So I think there is a role for us here. Thank you for bringing that forward. If there's nothing else, I'd like to get started with our presenters. We're going to be starting a little bit behind schedule, and we want to give them all the time due because it's a short time slot for them. So we may have to adjust our break time a little bit. But Lisa, with that, would you like to take the introductions for our presenter slate?
Sure. So we've got 3 presenters today. These are all projects that were funded through the first round of funding for ocean acidification and hypoxia. And so the first presentation will be given by Nancy Hotchkiss. The project intent was to develop a communications plan and strategy for outreach and education on ocean acidification and hypoxia impacts, science, and solutions. And this project concludes in May of 2024. And so Nancy, if you want to share your screen, you can just kickstart your presentation.
All right, I am going, hopefully, starting this. Yes, okay. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, I'm going to give you guys an update on the messaging plan project that we've been working on, and my partner Nettie and I, we just also want to say, we think it was very forward thinking of this project to really look at, there's lots of science components, and then how are we going to talk with this with the public, talk about it with the public. So thank you for including communications in this. Our charge has been to develop a coordinated messaging plan, create a communications toolkit, and inspiring key audiences. That's part of the work that we've already done, defining audiences. The idea to act to reduce the trajectory of ocean and climate change, looking at a more resilient future. The deliverables for our project right now, prioritization of audiences and particular actions, creation of the messages and that communication toolkit, and then finally developing an implementation plan to outline how this can get rolled out. As Lisa mentioned, our project is over in 24, but this is going to live on.
Nancy, we're not seeing you advancing your slides, and we're seeing the note portion of your presentation. I think
Good
you just
Lord.
need to flip it.
Okay, let me try stop share. You're seeing the note portion. That's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Are you seeing, let's see, sorry. Are you seeing this?
Yes, that's perfect now. Go ahead. Oh,
Okay.
apologies for the interruption.
That's all right. No, I appreciate that. Otherwise, I am not communicating well. So this is the project overview and the deliverables that I just talked about. And now I can't advance. Oh, there it is. Good. Sorry, I'm in Baltimore and we're having storms around here. So if I blink in and out, I apologize. So the process that we went through for figuring out which audiences we wanted to talk to, with any communication project, you don't want to just toss it out there and hope that it sticks. It's important to define which audiences you want to talk to and get as specific as possible, what you want to tell them and what you want to ask them to do. In the case of audiences here, we've been working closely with the OAH Council. We've done a number of workshops with them and also with the education and outreach group of that. And the first thing was we really just brainstormed a huge list of all the possible audiences across Oregon. It was a very large list. And we narrowed that down with the help of the council and with the outreach group. We looked at things that were factors we thought that would help us narrow it down. You know, what's the relative size of this audience in Oregon? You know, what's our ease in reaching them? Because if they're hard to reach, it's going to be challenging to get them to do anything. The weight that they could carry as influencer. How are they within their community and within their cohort of folks? Geographic distribution. Is this a group that's across the state or coastal or valley? We looked at where they fell in the Six Americas scale. And I'm sure everyone on here is familiar with the Six Americas work. If you ever want to go down a data rabbit hole, go to their website and you can do all sorts of sorts with their data. You can look at the state of Oregon, you can look at counties, you can look at cities, you can look at zip codes, you can look at age groups. So we went through it and did a deep dive on that to try and see if we could find the audiences that would give us the most bang for the buck. We then asked the council and the education group and also the OPAC to rate these audiences for us, to help us see where they seem to fall out in the order. Again, looking at those factors and their experience with these audiences, you know, particularly when it came to barriers with connecting them and likelihood that they can communicate with legislators, the value of increasing their civic readiness, and I'm going to talk more about that, and also their personal enthusiasm. The last part was we asked the folks to rank the top three, to just give us who are your top three, so we could then do some additional sorting. And what we came to, was 4 target audiences. First and foremost, and this one rose to the top for almost everyone, local government, and that was particularly port and county commissioners. That's who these are the council and the education outreach group all said this is an important group for us to get to. Second group was seafood suppliers and restaurants. Third group was commercial fisheries and the harvest industry. And then the fourth group is tourism, hospitality. And you'll see that those three, the seafood, the fisheries, and the hospitality, they kind of all work together, particularly when it comes to the coastal areas where you've got folks traveling there. When we talk about hotels and hospitality, we actually have even narrowed that down even more to non-chain hotels. You have some of the most amazing little bed and breakfasts and small hotels along the coast. So we want to be able to work with those groups. What are we going to do with them? Well, we are looking at these target audiences on how we can inform them and train them to become messengers about OAH issues and work within their group to kind of spread that out. Again, the end goal is to increase civic readiness. So what do we mean by civic readiness? When you're doing communications about conservation issues, you're often going for a fairly specific ask. And the challenge in this is we really don't have an incredibly specific thing we can point to. We don't have a piece of legislation. We don't have, a giant funding cycle or anything right now that we can say to people, we've got you fired up. Here's what we want you to do. So we're looking more about how we can get them into a state of civic readiness. And that is, possessing the skills and, as we say, fierce desire to respond to the calls that will come in the future for whether it's particular action, legislation, funding related to OAH and we're talking local, community, state, and regional level. Notice that we didn't say on an individual level, because in conservation communications, you kind of want to avoid the single person level because that gets to a phenomenon kind of one and done, which is, I've got my Prius, I'm done, I don't need to do anything more. We want people to think more on a community level, a local level, a neighborhood level, that it's you and more people involved in this. Right. So from there, we've gone through and done some prioritization for some metrics. And we drafted some metrics for each of these audiences. We refined those down a bit, again, with input from our groups. And we went out and we started doing some testing with these things. So in April, when we had the OAH symposium, thank you, Jenny and Leaf, for that. We had conversations with folks in each of these target audiences. We had prearranged to do that. And we asked them things, we were looking at metrics like this, so following training, could a certain percentage of port and county commissioners, would they step up and make official remarks and statements endorsing solutions? For the restaurants, would it make sense for a certain percentage of those restaurants to get all their seafood menu items from certified sustainable seafood suppliers? In the case of commercial fisheries, can we get a percentage, again, of does this make sense for the folks that are in the harvest industry to go out and articulate the challenges to other audiences, whether they're doing presentations through the community, through media, whatever. And then the last one was, is there a percentage of the Oregon hotels that want to participate regular opportunities that they can collaborate and share strategies and progress? So these were part of the conversations, and we have to be honest and tell you, these did not resonate during the interviews with our folks. They seem to be far too specific. So we've moved from that, taken a step back, and we're thinking more about our message development. We were looking at concepts through those focus groups, which we did in April to understand some of those barriers and benefits. And there were some great conversations there, which changed a little bit of our thinking. A second thing we did while we were out in Oregon in April was we worked with the general public to look at crafting basically an explanatory chain or an elevator speech about OAH using a card sort activity, which I'll show you. We worked with people at the aquarium. And then targeting messages that are designed to increase that civic readiness. That should get us to it. So the testing that we did, because it was really fun, and I would encourage anyone who wants to do something like this. We took sentences off of really reputable publications and sites that had, single sentences, or we took things out of paragraphs, all accurate sentences to talk about ocean acidification, some of its causes, some of its outcomes, and also with hypoxia, the same thing. So we had sentences all put out on a table and asked people to come over. And I will tell you, people were so happy to help us. That made me really happy. We only had like 2 people refuse us all day long. But we asked them, we said, gave them a quick introduction about what is ocean acidification and what is hypoxia. And then we challenged them and said, if you were going to talk with a group of 4th graders, short attention span, how would you explain this? And ask them to pick out the sentences that they thought would make a good start, knowing that they need to go quickly. And then took pictures of all of theirs and then ran it through a good old Excel spreadsheet and found that there actually was some continuity in what people were saying. So I'm going to show you 2 of them, which we have read them out loud, slowly and calmly, and they're each about 60 seconds. This one is how you would explain ocean acidification and hypoxia. I will not do a dramatic reading unless you would like me to. But basically, those are the sentences that they felt helped talk about it. And then the second one is how they would talk about hypoxia. Again, we have looked at these, we've timed them, we've sent it out to work with high schoolers, we've tried it with different audiences, and it seems to resonate with people. So when you're thinking of a quick way to have a conversation with someone and start to talk about it, these are good pieces, and we are happy to share them. Sorry. And from that, what we're looking at now is, instead of looking at those original metrics that we had formulated, which again, did not resonate with those messenger audiences that we want to work with, we're now exploring how we can do the best approach by looking at developing a donut. In conservation messaging, it's always good to start with the values of your audience. Is this an audience that really values, stewardship, or is it an audience that really values scientific accuracy? So start with a value, some statements there to resonate with your group. Then we would move to what we're calling our donut, which is those 2 paragraphs that you saw about ocean acidification and hypoxia, and then ending it with an audience-specific ask. And it may be something that's getting them to that civic readiness and how that works for that audience. We have a lot that we've done and a lot more that we need to do right now. We're working on the message visualization. We have a request out to the council, to the education group, asking for if they know of particular visuals, whether it's an infographic, piece of data that could be turned into an infographic, good videos that we think could help support not only these donut message pieces, but also pieces that could go into the communication toolkit. And then later this summer, we're going to come back with another round of message testing. And I think then there's also all of next year, creating communication toolkit, going out and field testing these things, doing training with our target audiences on how they can talk about this, and then doing some train the trainer workshops. As I said, Nettie and I will be done in 2024, and then it needs to live on through the implementation plan and getting some of these folks inspired. And I think that is it for us. We have time for questions.
Any questions for Nancy?
Karina has a question here.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Karina.
Thanks for the presentation. I did have a question about the first, well, let me ask. In the sentences about ocean acidification and explanations, were there options for the audience who was putting it together to attribute an explanation to why the oceans are absorbing more CO2? Because I'm just curious if that was an option for them to include.
Tell me more about that. I'm sorry, I'm not.
Well, there's no mention. In contrast, the hypoxia statement says climate change is blah, 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 blah. There is no attribution as to why CO2 is being absorbed more into the ocean in the first statement.
Yeah, we had it as part of the card sort, and there were sentences in there, but they did not rise up to the top at the same level. And we can certainly go back and look at it. We don't want to make it too long, but there may be a sentence in there that can, we can tweak it a little.
There might be a word or two. I mean, it's just,
Right.
it's lacking the attribution or explanation.
Mhm.
And I find that as an educator and a scientist, very problematic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Lisa. This is Steve. Just a quick question, and thank you, Nancy, for the presentation. Similar to Dr. Nielsen's question, I was wondering if in the sentences that you looked at, or potentially in future phases of the work, there will be discussion of potential solutions. So, you know, there's a nice blurb about OA and about hypoxia, and just curious if there's a point where there's a messaging work around the public understanding and advocating, perhaps, or saying, you know, and therefore we need funding for research, funding to advance climate resilience in our communities, things like that, that not just define what OA and hypoxia are, but provide ideas for addressing.
Yeah, it would be great to get do we have specific things we want to ask people to do? I will say if it's around supporting funding and that's the only part, that feels a bit distant from folks, you know, that and it also doesn't activate them as citizens particularly. We want them to know, here's what I can do, here's what my neighborhood can do, whether it is carbon reduction, but then you start getting into, okay, so if we want people to drive less, do we have bike lanes? Do we have mass transit? You kind of roll it all back into what are the barriers for people taking action? Does that make sense?
Thank you. That does make sense. I just thinking to the earlier parts of the presentation where you identified the 4 groups and the 4 sectors of the public and why they're important, and then, you know, what the intent of the messaging is. It's you know, hopefully it extends beyond just education, but it, you know, but translates that education and awareness into action.
Yeah, I will say part of the work that both Nettie and I have done previously with NOCI, which is the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. Part of the social science research that they found was that getting people to work together to come up with solutions often is more powerful than us telling them what to do. And I will also say they're going to come up with probably unique things that we would not have thought of. But as a communicator and a conservation communicator, I wish I had the specific thing I could tell people to do. You know, stop driving your car, don't do this, don't do that. And it's not clear yet.
Okay, one more question and then we'll move on. Christina.
Thanks very much. And Nancy, I really enjoyed your presentation. It's excellent. But I had the same question as Steve did. So you actually answered my question, but I would like to encourage the solutions phase, because it's one thing for people to understand the terminology and what's happening. But I think people also want to know, well, what, you know, this is pretty serious. What can we do individually to help? So I'm just lending my support for Steve's suggestion to move forward with that phase when you get a chance.
Yeah, and we totally agree. And again, you know, if there's anyone on this call who has a very specific thing you want us to make sure to include, we would love to hear from you. Because I also, while civic readiness is something I think is important, I would love to be able to point to something specifically that, you know, our representatives in the state are working on, or a community that is looking at increasing mass transit because it will reduce their carbon output. Yeah. So send them to us.
Thank you very much, Nancy. We appreciate the update on the project, and keep up the good work. So Cinnamon, if you want to start sharing your screen while I introduce you, that would be great. The second project that we're featuring today is the Marine Science Center Climate Monitoring Station. That's a project that was proposed by Bob Cowan, and Cinnamon Moffett, the research program manager, is one of the key project partners on it. So the goal of this was to establish a climate monitoring station producing time series data from Yaquina Bay, Oregon. And the goal is to share that data real time as well as via a public exhibit at the Sea Grant Visitor Center at the Hatfield Marine Science Center. So Cinnamon, I'm seeing a Zoom invite screen and not your presentation.
Well, we always have fun when we get to share. How about now, Lisa?
Yes, you got it. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cinnamon, and I'm working at Hatfield. And several of you have heard an update on this particular project over the last year or so, but I'll try to bring us up to speed on where we're at and where we're going. But Hatfield has been working on creating a long-term acidification and hypoxia monitoring site at Hatfield, which is located in Yaquina Bay. And we've got some funding from the Oregon Ocean Science Trust and House Bill 3114 to kind of kickstart us here. But let me back up just a little bit and let folks know why we're kind of doing that. There's been a lot of monitoring effort in Yaquina Bay for many, many years, both by OSU, but also federal and state agencies. But a lot of that was short-term projects that have ended or are hard to find the data around due to lack of resources and staff availability. So Hatfield really wanted to create something that was in our core mission as a marine research station, that we would have a long-term monitoring station at Hatfield. So in the fall of 2021, Hatfield received some funding to replace our pump house pier in Groin, which is where we get water that's pumped up to the Hatfield Center to run all of our seawater systems. And in that redesign, we decided to hold some space for a climate monitoring station out on the pier. And so what we have here is the new pump house. Can you all see my mouse? I'm seeing Dick is the face I can see. Okay. You can also see the new pier and the new replaced groin. So if I go back, this is where we started, the old pump house and the old pier, and this is where we're at now. So inside of that pump house, we have the pumps that are supplying material or supplying water up to our facility, but we also have a little climate monitoring room that is held just for us to work with. So just an update on where we're at. The dock remodel is done and the room is complete. And here's what we now have to play with. We have a little room, which is about 50 square foot. And we have a hole in the floor, which is 32 by 12 inches. And you can kind of see that hole right there. And so what we're going to use the House Bill 3114 funding for is what we do in that room and what we do under that room. And so we are just starting to be able to move those things forward. Our plan has always been to have a suite of instruments that we put into the water and a few instruments that we have in that room that will be able to be benchtop support for OHA. And what's on the screen now are some of the instruments that we have purchased. We have a YSI XO sonde, we have a Seabird CFET, we have a Seabird Suna, a Seabird triplet, and a Berkelator. All of these instruments kind of do different things, and many of them actually do the same thing in a slightly different way, which was an important component of our long-term monitoring station because we wanted duplicity. We wanted multiple instruments reading the same information so we can do redundancy to make sure that we're getting the information we need. And so the YSI and the Seabird CFOX are collecting things like depth and pH and dissolved oxygen, but also turbidity, temperature, and conductivity, where our Suna is collecting nitrate and nitrite, and the triplet will be collecting chlorophyll A. So we are very excited that the instruments are in hand. This is T-Chris from EPA opening the boxes. It took us nearly a year to get them on site due to chip issues and supply chain issues, but we have them here. We are still waiting for the cables, basically the cables that will take the instruments from being in the water up to our data logger. They're not here yet, but we're hoping soon. We're also waiting to get a bench top pump that will provide provide water up into the climate monitoring room for things like the percolator. It is surprising how difficult it is to find a pump that will lift water 28 feet from the bottom up into the room. So we've been working hard with a company called Harrington to create and design a pump for us to be able to meet our needs. The other thing that we're doing is that in this new design of the pump house, we no longer have the same structure under the pier. And so in the past, we were able to have basically a PVC pipe that we put all of our instruments down into, and that PVC pipe was attached to the pilings under the pier. In the design of the new building, the new structure, you can kind of see that there are these concrete piles, and there's a lot less of the old wood piles. Therefore, we no longer have infrastructure under the dock to attach our PVC pipe or our well to put our instruments into. And so we've gotten really creative in figuring out how to get secure those instrumentation packets to be able to collect water underneath the monitoring station. And so what you have on the screen is our design for our deployment sled. It is running on cables that are secured by heavy weights down at the bottom in the water. And the sled will be able to be pulled up and down on these cables. And then it'll attach, this is the really cool part, it'll attach to the bottom of the pier, and then the instrumentation package itself will lift out and through the floor. And part of this is because the spacing that we got in the climate monitoring station for the hole in the floor is pretty small, and we're pulling a lot of instrumentation through it. And so we wanted the structure, the support structure, to not have to fit through the hole in the floor. And so this is our design right now. And we're really excited that our summer interns that are working in our innovation lab here at Hatfield are the ones that are putting these together. At the end of the summer, we hope to have 3 sleds complete. We'll have one for our core instrumentation, which is the instruments that I was just talking about. We'll have a sled that'll be set up as our experimental. And so folks that are interested in bringing their own instruments in to compare them to our core instruments will be able to have a place to basically set it up and play. And then we'll have another sled basically sitting on the shelf and ready to go, so that for this long-term climate monitoring station, all the instruments that I was telling you about, we've gotten duplicate, so that if one goes down or needs to be maintained or needs to be calibrated, the next set will be able to go down. And hopefully that'll really help make sure we don't have any data gaps. Some of these instruments actually have to be sent off to be calibrated. And so we're excited about having those things in hand and in place. The other thing that we've talked about before with this group is that we identified 4 different users groups for this data. Folks from researchers to resource managers to the recreational users of the bay, and also the general public. We are digging into the fact that each one of these different users need the data not only to be presented in a different way, but also to have the back end QA/QC, so that's the quality assurance and quality control standards, to be slightly different. The general public doesn't need the same level of QA/QC that the researchers do. So we're digging into that right now and working on designing our QA/QC for each of these different users groups. This is the schematic that I presented when we got the funding right from the beginning that shows how this whole system is kind of playing together. We've primarily been talking about this front end piece, basically what's under the floor of the climate monitoring station, but all of that is completely dependent on the back end robust infrastructure that is also being put into place to make sure the data is collected, stored, and served out to all of our different users. And so we are working right now with the university's UIT infrastructure design team, and they're putting together this whole middle box for us right now to be able to serve our different user groups. The other thing that we are working on is to have, as Lisa said in my intro, to have an exhibit in the visitor center at Hatfield, run by Sea Grant, to basically increase the conversation around climate change and its effect on oceans and estuaries, and to work a little bit on improving our visitors' data visualization literacy. And so that has been an iterative process. We've gone back and forth a bit. We've gathered information, kind of like the presentation before me, Nancy was talking about. We've tested some of the conversations, and right now we have panels that are in draft with our graphic designer. They'll come back to us as a draft format, and we'll be able to review those, talk to the visitor center staff and see what they think will work. And hopefully we'll be able to have those up by the end of this project. The other thing, the other data user group that we're working to support is that general public that will be able to access this data on the NANUS website, which is a data visualization tool that lots of folks use. It's a really strong and robust system, and we're hoping to be able to live stream our data to that platform by next spring. As you know, these kind of projects are just only successful if you have lots and lots of partners. And so right now we are working through all of the complex MOUs and moving those through our legal system. The one that we're doing right now is working with OSU and EPA. Those are two big entities that have lots of moving parts, but we'll have an MOU in place that allows us both to play once together and to be able to have shared data that's presented out to the public in many different ways. So we're excited about these MOUs moving forward. And as always, the long-term goal of this is that this is going to be integrated into Hatfield's core infrastructure. And so we are working on augmenting our budget structure to be able to provide long-term support. So once the House funding is complete and we have the infrastructure in place, Hatfield will be able to maintain and keep this project moving forward. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions for Cinnamon? And Cinnamon, if you could not stop sharing your screen, that would be great so we can see folks. Awesome, thank you. Questions or comments? It looks like there was one in the chat. What are the specific solutions? Charlie, was that from the previous? Yeah, that was a previous one. Does the new pump house and climate station have an SLR adaptation plan? That was a question in the chat.
Yeah, Charlie, the replacement of the pier and the pump house did take into account a bit of sea level rise. But as we know, that is something that we still need to work on for the Hatfield campus at large, for sure. I'm assuming you're talking, Charlie, about the infrastructure itself.
Yes, I was. And thanks. I'd love to learn more about how you guys are thinking about that stuff.
All right. Thank you so much, Cinnamon. That was awesome. And it's great to see this project getting some legs and so much progress being made. Caitlin, you can grab the controls, Caitlin, while I introduce you. So the third project that we're featuring today from the first round of funding from House Bill 3114 is evaluating the interaction of water quality and eelgrass in Coos Bay using a biophysical model. So Caitlin Maggle is a co-PI on the project. She is with the University of Washington Puget Sound Institute, and they are looking to understand what eco-hydrological dynamics confer vulnerability to OAH, and how would the absence of eelgrass alter pH and dissolved oxygen conditions and variability. So Caitlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. Just a screen share check that you're seeing my slides.
Looks great.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for inviting me today to share with you an overview and an update on our project. Specifically, as Lisa mentioned, we're looking at the interaction of water quality and eelgrass in Coos Bay. And although I'm here representing University of Washington, I want to assure you that my roots run in Oregon. I first was introduced to marine science at Hatfield Marine Science Center in 2008, and I did my PhD work at Oregon State University working in Oregon's estuaries. So certainly not here representing Washington but more so my interests in Oregon. Also just want to quickly acknowledge the project partners on this project. So we have folks from University of Washington, University of Oregon, South Sloughs National Estuarine Research Reserve, and the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. And of course, thank you to OOST and the OHH Council for funding this work. So eelgrass is the common type of seagrass that inhabits many of the estuaries along the Pacific coast. Here's a picture of a nice eelgrass bed shown at low tide. This is located in Coos Bay across from Charleston. Seagrasses have long been recognized for their services to estuarine ecosystems, as well as to society. In fact, the value of these services provided by eelgrass for the Salish Sea was recently estimated at $87,000 per hectare per year. And a growing number of studies have found that estuarine seagrasses, including eelgrass, have local effects on carbonate chemistry and dissolved oxygen. However, the importance of seagrass mitigation of ocean acidification and hypoxia and the scales at which that mitigation can be realized are still relatively unknown. So it's particularly critical to understand how mitigation by eelgrass translates at an estuary-wide scale under highly variable environmental conditions, which we know occur in estuaries. As a refresher for some, or just a quick biology lesson for others on how this mitigation hypothetically occurs, during photosynthesis, seagrasses, which are rooted aquatic plants, take up carbon dioxide from the water column and release dissolved oxygen. This results in increased pH and dissolved oxygen at local scales around seagrass beds. In addition, some of that carbon that gets removed from the water column is actually stored in the roots and rhizomes of the plant and can become sequestered below ground, which we call blue carbon storage. So overall, the study was motivated by the fact that the Pacific Northwest estuaries are particularly vulnerable to ocean acidification due to ocean upwelling and the close ocean estuary coupling that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. This brings low pH and low dissolved oxygen waters into the coastal zone where they impact estuaries and the species living in estuaries. On top of that, we have added the anthropogenic impacts that further exacerbate this natural phenomenon. As many of you probably know, Coos Bay is an important estuary in Oregon. It's home to ecologically, economically, and culturally important species and ecosystems. And like other US West Coast estuaries, Coos Bay is vulnerable to both natural and anthropogenic causes of environmental degradation, including climate and land use change. And recent declines in eelgrass in Coos Bay further highlight the need to understand the consequences of eelgrass variability for services like OAH mitigation. So this provides urgency for our research on the importance and the scale of eelgrass mitigation and its ability to fight OAH. For this project, we were able to leverage existing water quality and eelgrass monitoring data in Coos Estuary, an existing hydrodynamic circulation model of Coos Bay, and a biogeochemical model framework, all with the overall objective to produce a biophysical model of Coos Bay that includes water quality, including DO and pH, plankton, eelgrass, etc. And then to use this model to understand the dynamics of pH, dissolved oxygen, and eelgrass in the Coos Estuary and asked the following questions. So our first question was just generally, what conditions confer vulnerability to ocean acidification and hypoxia? And then 2, how would changes in eelgrass abundance alter those pH and DO conditions and their variability? These questions support multiple objectives of Oregon's OAH action plan, including our understanding of both the ecological and the socioeconomic vulnerabilities related to OA, our ability to adapt or be resilient to OAH, as well as kind of communicating and promoting solutions and raising awareness to what might be done to help support OAH resilience. In addition, once this model is created, it can be used in the future to explore numerous additional research questions about climate, ocean processes, and land use changes for Coos Bay. So just a quick overview of the model. So this is a 3-dimensional model, computational model of Coos Bay. It's based on a hydrodynamic study by Dave Sutherland's group at University of Oregon. And so what we do is we initially run that hydrodynamic model and then use the model output to calculate transport of water quality variables, including DO and pH, around the estuary, and then including additional source and sink processes and relevant kinetics that are happening across the estuary. The biogeochemical model part of this has 23 variables, which are shown in this figure. The details are not important, but it includes things like nutrient sources and sinks from the oceans, rivers, and other point sources. The model simulates biogeochemical processes such as phytoplankton productivity, nutrient uptake and release, settling and resuspension of sediments, etc. And then ultimately can be used to compute the resulting dissolved oxygen and pH levels at any given location or time in the estuary. In addition, as shown in the bottom right here, there's an SAV, or a submerged aquatic vegetation module. And in this case, that would be an eelgrass submodel, which is divided into above ground and below ground components and has its own kind of modeled processes describing the plants. This type of 3D model has been used extensively in the Salish Sea to study aspects of environmental change, including OAH, sea level rise, marine heat waves, etc. The eelgrass submodel has also been implemented, tested, and validated in the Salish Sea. So we're really building on lots of previous experience applying this type of complex computational model to Coos Bay. So where are we in the process? Significant progress has been made in terms of the development of the model. So the model is set up now on University of Washington's high performance supercomputer called HIAC. We've completed the model grid preparation and kind of setup of the hydrodynamic model for our target year, which is 2014. You can see in the lower right corner here, this red inset box, an example of what that model grid looks like. It has an average grid size of 45 meters, so pretty fine scale resolution. And the hydrodynamic model is based on river inputs, which are shown in these blue dots in the map, as well as ocean boundary forcing from the Pacific Ocean, and then different water level monitoring data stations, which are shown in the black dots. We're now working on setting up and calibrating that biogeochemical model, as well as establishing the eelgrass initial conditions based on monitoring data that we have available. So to inform that development of the biogeochemical model, we've gathered and synthesized existing water quality and eelgrass data for Coos Bay from a number of different sources. The locations of the water quality data that we've collected are shown here on the left. So spanning that kind of ocean or estuarine end member all the way up into freshwater sources, collecting as much temperature, dissolved oxygen, nutrient data as we possibly can. On the right, you can see the PMEP layer of describing the maximum observed extent of eelgrass in Coos Bay, which is shown in the green shading. And then on top of that, we have collected point data, existing point data, to refine aspects of the percent cover of eelgrass, the shoot density, above and below ground biomass, within that maximum extent where we have information available. So together, the water quality data and the eelgrass data are being used now to parameterize the biogeochemical model and to further validate the model outputs. Again, this is with the goal of answering kind of two general questions. The first is, what conditions confer vulnerability to OAH? And so our goal for this question is to produce spatial temporal model outputs of simulated water quality variables and eelgrass biomass, and to identify potential OAH hotspots and analyze the ecohydrological processes or conditions that might confer either resilience or enhance vulnerability to OAH in Coos Bay. And so targeting both processes that contribute to that vulnerability, and also where do we find vulnerability or resilience within the estuary. And then the second question is about changes in eelgrass abundance and how that might alter pH and DO conditions. And so for this, we'll also conduct basically modeled scenarios of the Coos Bay estuary with and without eelgrass to evaluate the alteration of pH and DO conditions based on that change in eelgrass abundance. So for example, the figure right here shows hypothetical results of the differences in pH and DO concentrations across time at some given location in Coos Bay under scenarios with and without eelgrass in blue and gray. And we know that there will be variation in these conditions over time and over space, but in general, what we expect to find is that DO and pH are on average higher in the scenario where we have eelgrass. So the example here is that blue dashed line compared to a scenario where we don't have eelgrass. So for example, the gray dashed line. And we're really interested to find out, what is the magnitude of change that we see between those two scenarios? And that'll kind of help us inform what the relative importance of eelgrass is in this system with relation to OAH. Okay, and then we also have outreach and dissemination plans. The model solutions and the analysis will be publicly available and published and shared with our project partners, including the area's tribes. But we also want to produce information and materials for public outreach and use by specific end users. So in collaboration with the education folks at South Slough at the National Estuarine Research Reserve, we'll develop public exhibit materials for the South Slough Visitor Center and the Charleston Marine Life Center, and contribute to curriculum for South Slough's very popular program called Teachers on the Estuary. And then we believe that model results will be helpful to inform ongoing eelgrass restoration and protection efforts within the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. Another potential end user is Oregon Department of State Lands and their Aquatic Resource Management Program, which administers the removal fill permit program for Oregon. This is a program that requires anyone planning to remove or fill material in state wetlands to obtain permits to ensure the protection of state waters. And so with respect to this project, we hope that our products will be informative for updating sections of that removal fill guide that relate to managing eelgrass and informing compensatory mitigation policies. Furthermore, project results will support PMEP's goals for conserving and restoring essential fish habitat. They could be used to inform the ongoing update of the Coos Bay Estuary Management Plan, and they can provide information to shellfish growers who wish to understand OAH vulnerability within Coos Bay and potential impacts to shellfish production now or in the future. With that, thanks for your attention. Look forward to any questions, and also please feel free to reach out to me for any further discussion about this project.
Thank you, Caitlin. Any questions for Caitlin? Christine.
Hi, Caitlin. That's a great update. Really appreciate how hard you all working to move this forward. It's a massive undertaking, but combining and analyzing these things in scenarios is really, really important. With that in mind, with the usability in terms of estuary management plans and so forth, have you considered looking at changes in the hydrological model that might be part of a dredging increase in the Coos Bay estuary? I just wonder whether that's one of your scenarios.
That's a great question. Yeah, and certainly would relate to this project very closely. I don't think it's within the scope of this project to look at those changes in dredging or sediment management. But I know Dave Sutherland's research group at University of Oregon has been using their model to look at using the hydrodynamic model to look at changes in sediment supply and sediment management over time. And so we may be able to do that kind of in a qualitative sense at this point to kind of compare the results that we get with some of the results that they've got that they have from looking at specific sediment management questions. But I also think that's a great idea for kind of, again, like once this model is established, there are more questions that it could be used to ask, and that's a really good candidate because it would affect a number of different functions, including where and how much eelgrass we might find located across the bay, as well as the ability for eelgrass to affect water quality in beneficial ways.
Yeah, and also the intrusion of more low oxygen acidic waters into that area. So, you know, I know your graphic of with and without eelgrass for oxygen and CO2 is really helpful. So just to think about some of that stuff, I know this is really complex, but it's wonderful to be able to adapt that model from the Salish Sea and begin to put these parts together. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for that suggestion.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Caitlin. This is Steve. Kind of a comment and a question. First of all, I really appreciate your presentation and also in particular identifying end users of the product of the model from, you know, Oregon's removal fill aquatic resource mitigation framework to the estuary management planning process. And with that, I guess my question is, and I think I heard it, but I just want to confirm, is that this model will be submitted for peer review. Are you planning to publish paper? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. I just, having that science, best available science, in place for things like, EFH, Section 7, NEPA analyses, especially as places like Coos Bay experience, increasing proposals for development, had that model in place to inform, things that the state of Oregon does, whether it's DSL or whether it's the Coastal Zone Management Program or whatever. I think that this is a key piece to that puzzle. So just giving you a shout out and thanks for this work, and we'll look forward to that, reading that publication.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for highlighting that. And we do intend to publish it in the scientific literature. So it's out there and peer reviewed and available as for a reference. But I just chose to highlight some of the kind of non-peer reviewed publication applications as well.
All right, thank you so much, Caitlin, and thanks for reminding us of your Oregon roots. It's really important. You are a tremendous asset in Oregon and are now in Washington for Oregon, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I turn it back over to you, Laura, to go into the break, I just wanted to share with everybody that because of House Bill 5202, the Oregon Ocean Science Trust did receive $1 million for nearshore data collection, modeling, and assessments. And our goal was to get half of that funding out the door and to all 7 of those projects by June 30th. And I can affirm that we did, within 48 hours, meet that goal. So half of that money has indeed been distributed. All 7 projects have 50% of the funds to start their work. So we are on track with dispersing funds and getting all of this work done. So thanks to our presenters today, and we'll continue to do these 10 to 15 minute highlights of the OAH and the nearshore projects as they continue. So back to you, Laura.
Great, thank you. And yes, thank you to each of the presenters for keeping us apprised of the good work. It's just cool to see how many partnerships are being developed through the efforts that we're supporting, some in full and some just in part. So that's really great. With that, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene here at 1:30 for our strategic planning approval. Oh, you got to scoot it up on the camera. Thank you, Linda. Not quite see our facial expressions, but a little more. So I think it's fine. I mean, I don't know, or you can scooch in, but I feel like I don't know.
I can move over and then we can all, if that helps, maybe Steve could pop over one. I don't know if you can get a little closer. That's no problem.
Right.
I'm not far apart.
The camera's still way far away there. All right, we're gonna get reconnected here. Thank you for the extra few minutes on our end. Much appreciated. We'll resume the meeting of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust with the second part of our agenda. Before we do, I'd like to, we talked about the need to reconvene on the ocean acidification, hypoxia communications and messaging, perhaps a little more robustly as a joint effort of the 2 organizations charged with this, the Science Trust and the OAH Council. So I believe it's nice that we have staff to that council here in Salem with us, and she's agreed to convene a work meeting between these two entities so that we can help to foster that project along. We've had some changes in leadership at the OAH Council, and also it's just a very prickly and difficult, slippery task. So I don't know if Nancy is still on the call. I don't think so, but you'll see that coming through your public meeting announcements, hopefully sometime in the very near future. All right, with that, we have a great task in front of us. I'm excited that we have a strategic action plan to finalize. And the copy to that was included for those of you online in your on your agenda. I will start by just doing a really quick overview for everyone who was not in the room. This board met in April in person in Newport for an all-day strategic action planning, which was facilitated by Lisa. We came up with what we think is a very nice, tight, and succinct document that both one talks about some of the accomplishments that we've had to date and also where we want to go in the next 5 years. Probably the biggest thing that we focused on was just our need to enhance the state's capacity for science and our own capacity to help the state in that. So to that end, it was very fortuitous that we had an opportunity to take some funding from a group, Builders Initiative. Builders has given us $100,000 per year for a multi-year grant to hire a few positions that will help move our work forward. The one position that we had talked about in at length in other meetings is a development fundraiser contractor. And then also a communications contractor. So one person is helping to develop the messages for key audiences about the value of our work and the need for science in the state. And the other is taking those messages out into the broader community for both private funding as well as public funding. And by public, I mean federal and state both. So those two positions will be funded in part by this, in full by this grant. And we also will be able to use this grant to do some more needs assessment with inventorying the current status of data in the state. The next part of the funding that we've received from Builders will help in part to fund the Ocean Science Summit, which will be somewhat of a revisiting and replicating the conversations from 7 years ago where we had the first Ocean Science Summit. We'll do that again in December of 2023. And we do have other financial needs for it to make that summit happen. So we have sponsorship opportunities available. And then the third thing that came out of the strategic action planning was a recognition that the Ocean Science Trust does not have a framework or guidelines for ensuring equity, diversity, inclusion in our work, and that we would benefit greatly from having an advisory committee to help us develop a framework and also be part of our work moving forward. So those are kind of the main parts of the plan. Lisa, I'll ask you to jump in on any key things that perhaps should be mentioned at this point, and I know that we have a list of some considerations for and questions from our board on the draft.
Yeah, we've got 7 issues and we'll walk through those, the comments that the board
I
members
don't
make.
get audio. I don't know if that's our end or your end.
I think it's your end.
I figured it was us. We also go to speaker view. Was before. Happen on the iPad moment. Stand by one moment, please.
Maybe we should have one other person try and speak just to make sure.
Lisa, you want to say something?
Sure, Oregon Ocean Science
Okay, never mind,
Trust.
we can't hear you.
I mean, maybe Christine, just to make sure it's
Oh.
not Lisa.
Christine.
Say something.
Volume. Say something.
Testing 1, 2, testing.
Oh, there
1,
we
2.
go.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got 7 issues that came up as a result of comments that board members made in the review of the document since the strategic planning session. We'll walk through those. We also have 3 completed requests for proposals that have already been reviewed by DSL. They're ready to hit the street tomorrow if the board decides to move forward with the development contractor, the communications consultant, and this small RFP to do the inventory in the State of Science report to help support the summit. So we've pretty much got things teed up. We just need to work through these elements of the plan. Do you want to do that now, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let me just call this up here. Okay, so in terms of the comments that were made on page 2, we had by advancing networks with California current scientists, and the suggestion was to make that West Coast. And Christine asked the question, under sustainable funding, we talked about strengthening the relationship with the OOST and the Coastal Caucus, but she asked if this should be more than the Coastal Caucus. And Christine, feel free to comment on that.
Yes, I would like to emphasize that point. And I guess I feel like I've gone through a the last couple of months has made me realize how little is understood about the connections between people on land and the oceans and the estuaries. So I think it's really important that we reach out beyond that. I mean, I think we definitely need to communicate to the Coastal Caucus, and but we would be remiss to not try to educate other legislative bodies in that. And I'll probably chime in a little bit later about some of those issues.
Okay, for this small section of the plan, is it okay to just put that addendum on there and other legislative bodies, and then we can be more specific later? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Just to highlight what Charlie was bringing out and Representative Gomberg is, I mean, our voices aren't necessarily heard and understood.
Okay, thanks for that, Christine. The next comment was on page
Before we
4.
move on,
I was just thinking sorry, thank you, Chair Anderson. I was just thinking legislative bodies, I think that does capture it for this specific bullet relative to sustainable funding, but I just wanted to also think about other coastal leaders, ocean stakeholders. Yeah. So, we spoke earlier today about the importance of local government, county commissioners, port commissioners, things like that. And they're a part of this discussion, but I think with respect to the point being made under the sustainable funding, but it does kind of speak to me to specific legislative action. So I think that I'm fine with that edit and I think it's appropriate. But so I was just going through that exercise in my head to making sure that we also don't lose sight of other constituencies on the coast and decision makers that can also be a part of Boost achieving its mission.
Thanks for that, Steve. And Laura, we can't see you very well. You're like three blurry bodies. So if I don't see one of the people on your meeting side, just let me know. I might talk over you a couple times, but that's just because we can't really see you.
That sounds just fine.
Okay. Page 4, a small edit, but an important one, change area.
Wait, we're not there yet.
I'm sorry. There was another edit on that page referring to West Coast scientists as opposed to California Current. So I'm just curious if the intention of the comment there or the directional change is to, when you specify the California Current, you're suggesting any scientist who works in the California Current ecosystem is who you'd be encouraged to work with. Are we actually intending to have a geography as opposed to a systems focus in that piece? That's my question, because that does change it quite a bit.
That's a good question for the board. We might just want to remove any and all reference and just say ocean and coastal scientists, or just scientists and investigators. Thoughts, Christine?
Yeah, I think that's more spot on. And yeah, and I think our capacity, as was just demonstrated, we've got folks up in estuaries, and so right on.
Are you good with that, Karina?
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think anybody who's working and doing good science around topics we're interested in for Oregon should be people we want to work with and hear from.
Awesome. Any more on that page? Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Page 4, just an edit to change area to environment.
Markup copy up there. Yeah. We're looking in our hard copies and we realize we should be looking at your screen to see those red lines.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay. The next proposed edit was on page 6 at the very top, to support research and monitoring of nearshore keystone species versus support science and monitoring. Any concerns with that?
No. Is there?
Well, is it the bill? Isn't that the language of the bill?
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's consistent with the language of the bill, I think it's trying to.
It is.
Okay. So the change is consistent with the language of the bill?
Yes.
Okay, then
Okay,
that's
yeah.
good.
And then the next topic was on page 8, number 3, develop, enhance the state's capacity to conduct high priority ocean and coastal research by advancing networks among scientists and organizations investigating the ecosystem of the California Current. Any concerns about that edit?
I need a moment just to think about this for a second.
I think it should be consistent with the edit we made on the first edit we made relative to California Current versus West Coast. And Dr. Nielsen made the point about we want we want to build our next work with science, with science that's going on the issues that we care about. Perhaps regardless of geography. So I'm agnostic as to what the actual language is. I just want to make it consistent with the edit we made on the previous page.
Okay. I think we're close with this, but I'll go back and just do a double check on it. But I think removing the California current and just using that type of language would make it more consistent.
Just to clarify, I wasn't necessarily opposed to the California current ecosystem, which is what we're embedded in, you know, biophysically, if you will. What I was suggesting was we wanted any scientist who's working in this system and doing work that's relevant to kind of be part of our potential network. I don't know if that helps. So I
thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
The other one was like only West Coast researchers, which suggested, you know, maybe an affiliation with a West Coast institution or something like that.
And unnecessary limitation.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. I can do an edit on that and make sure those are both consistent. Sustainable funding. So this first one by 2026, implement a $2 to $3 million annual funding competitive grant program to address Oregon's ocean and coastal research priorities. So Christine, your comment, I know that this is in the original legislation, but with pushback as to where we are, is this appropriate to put here? This is sort of an acceptance that we will enter into these negotiations. Should we discuss this in detail? You want to kickstart that?
Well, that was about, you know, the original bill that established that we would be dealing with kind of funding coming from offshore development. At that point was natural gas and so forth. And now that wind energy is here and all of the things that are going on, that's where I was coming from on that. Just going back to that legislation, and I know we had a brief discussion when you were leading the, you know, our workshop there. And so I just think it's important for our group to kind of come back together and just at least put a pin in some of that, some of those issues, I guess.
Christine, this is Laura, and I guess when I read that, it doesn't hearken to any specific source to me. It's just a statement of what a fundraising goal would be for the organization as a whole, and that we had even went so far, I don't know if it's in here, but we were looking to kind of find almost equal parts, if you will, of state, federal, and private funding to support any additional funds that would potentially flow through future development is not, I don't think, included in my mind in this fundraising goal here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I just was wanting to at least put that out because of what's going on with offshore wind.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Chair Anderson. Yeah, I was just gonna kind of echo what Chair Anderson said about at least my understanding with this is that it was somewhat aspirational and not tied to any specific source of funding, but just saying, you know, as part of our strategic plan, we'd like to be in a place where this is, you know, we're dispersing this level of funding to ocean coastal research.
This was my understanding too of this discussion point back in April and the way it appears here. And I think we were also had discussion around, we thought it was not only somewhat aspirational, but also achievable.
Yeah.
We were trying to, you know, kind of strike a balance, not put ourselves in a position to fail.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. And Christine, we do have a comment further below about the offshore energy piece, so we will get to that. We'll get to that coming up here. Are you good with us moving forward, Christine, on that number 1 then, based on that?
Fine, yeah.
Okay. So the next comment was on page 9 by 2024, strengthen the relationship. And this first said with the Coastal Caucus, but again, harking back to an earlier comment Christine made, we were suggesting a modification, strengthen the relationship with all Oregon legislators, including the Coastal Caucus, recognizing the importance of all legislators in the state of Oregon to value coastal and ocean research. Any opposition to that change?
I 100% agree with that. It's Oregon's ocean, not just the Coastal Caucus. We've got to reach far and deep.
Good edit. All right. So the next one is on page, excuse me, 10 under administration and board. By 2025, review the legislation that created the OOST and propose changes to address the executive director designation. And this is where Christine said, yes, this should be reviewed and is related to the offshore leases. And the performance metric had a comment as well. The metric would be that the desired changes to the statute that created the OOST are made. And Steve's asked if we actually need to secure the statutory changes to achieve the metric, or do we just need to identify, develop, and propose the statutory changes regardless of whether the legislature adopts them?
Yeah, I have a question. It looks like this is a pretty specific item about designating an executive director. And it's specific to that. I'm not sure it's opening up. Well, it might be if we're reviewing the legislation to proposing other changes, but I thought it was very specific to a need to have a desire to have an executive director role. Is my memory correct on that?
My recollection is, and I don't have the legislation in front of me, but that the one of us is voted on to be the executive director. And in the future, if we're managing $2 to $3 million in grants, we'd like to have a paid executive director. So that may require some changes to the legislation. And so I do think that it was limited to that as well.
Yeah.
Steve, anything from you on that?
No, thank you. That I was just looking for that clarification on what we actually needed to achieve to meet that metric. And it sounds like it's outcome based. So it's the metric is whether or not we have a paid executive director position, regardless of the, not creation of the statute or changes to the statute, but getting that position. Yeah. So thank you for that clarification.
So does this capture it now in terms of everybody's understanding and with that additional text? Any opposition to that? Okay, Christine, I'm not sure, you brought up the offshore leases here. We didn't create anything in the action plan itself to address the short discussion we had about offshore leases at the April meeting. So I just want to open it up to you guys in you, Laura, to have whatever space you need or want to have to discuss this offshore lease issue and whether you or not you want to make any amendments to your draft plan to incorporate anything relative to that.
Lisa, I don't think that it's something that we need to do for the time duration of this action plan. So no, I don't think we need to open that further.
Okay. Christine, are you fine with us having that conversation at a future gathering, maybe when we can either add it as a specific agenda item or a topic down the road.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a topic and look at that. Certainly, I guess I just put some of these commentary in here, just, anytime we talk about changing legislation, I guess is, if it's just a review and it can be interpreted easily, but, we just have to be cautious of opening something and amending, so.
Okay. All right.
I think that's a really good point, and we'll probably need to take this up more in depth on a future agenda before proceeding.
Okay. So the last piece of your plan just takes all that verbiage and makes a nice little table out of it. And the most important column, I think, on this table is the last one to the far right, because that's where we document our progress, which is going to be really important for any entities that provide funding to the OOST. So the idea is that we begin providing updates on the status of all of these as we begin implementation. And it's a pretty succinct 12-page plan. As we described in the beginning, we didn't want to create a monumental document. It needs to be really clean, brief, to the point. So with the proposed double check on these two specific strategies to make sure that they're in sync with one another, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling, I'll get to those. We'll make sure that that one and the one on the other page are synced up. I think we'll have a final version of your plan unless there's any questions or comments.
Here.
So I'm still a little confused, Lisa. We're just letting you move to that matrix and put things on there? I'm just not sure where we're at with that.
Oh, no, that's just a table that the OOST can use, Laura can use, the board can use to document progress made on each of the activities.
I'm curious if the first one is underway. I'm trying to remember.
I think today, actually, I think that's next up on the agenda. Lisa, were you going to walk us through some of the contract? So that'll be one.
Okay, I was just curious if the timeline was realistic, depending on where we were in terms of done, because that's coming up pretty fast.
It is, and we are ready to rock and roll on those. So let me
with enthusiasm.
Okay, great.
With enthusiasm.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't misaligned with timing and everything.
It does seem that way, but no, we had a lot of discussion about this. In fact, did we not, Lisa? So I'm gonna actually let you continue on the rollout of maybe explaining some of these contracts getting us to the next point, or do you want approval of, shall we approve this before we move into contracts? Maybe
let's go with the approval of the plan and wrap that up, and then we'll jump into these contracts.
All right, before we approve this plan, I just want to say a massive thank you to you for helping us get, spend a day, get through a lot of ideas, thoughts, and possibilities to something that's very concrete, doable. And when I look at the things in the status, I'm like, we can do that. This is a doable plan. So thank you for pulling all this together for us, Lisa. We're lucky to have you on our team. So with that, we'll go ahead and see if there's a motion to approve the strategic action plan as amended. I think Christina's.
Yeah, I move to approve the plan as amended, and thank you again for doing all the work.
I'll second it.
Great. Christina first and Karina second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, thanks, everybody. And you are an awesome team to work with. That was a great session, and the fact that we were able to come up with this document after one meeting was pretty incredible. So what we were anticipating is that today you could see the progress being made on these RFPs and hopefully give the green light to let them go. So since April, we've been working with DSL. We crafted scopes of work for 3 things: the development fundraiser, the communications consultant, and an inventory and state of the science report. So the fundraiser one is complete. We are hoping to issue it tomorrow. If you like what you see, I'm just going to scroll really quickly through state government stuff to get to the important piece of this. So what we did was provide DSL with a description of what OOST does and all the front end, and then specific things that we're asking of this development fundraiser. So they're the primary person for the OOST. They'll lead fundraising activities, coordinate with the board, staff, and other contractors, create, grow, and maintain relationships, promote, communicate, and help achieve our mission, lead fund development programs to meet our budget and grant-making goals, develop and implement an annual fund development plan. So that's going to be key to this. Again, cultivating relationships, make sure that they submit timely inquiries and grant proposals and grant reports. And a really important piece of this is that we have to be joined at the hip with DSL, because how we apply for grants has to be in sync with how DSL talks with the legislature and gets approval for additional budget limitation. So that's a key part of this. And we've already talked with DSL about being on the review committee for this to select the individual. Maintain and strengthen a culture of philanthropy, provide status summary and update reports quarterly, assist in the marketing and promotional materials that the communications contractor will be developing. And then some basic things that fundraisers do, maintaining a donor database, gift acknowledgements, all that stuff. So we came up with a list of qualifications. We're asking that they have some level of certification in fundraising. That is critically important. That they have at least 5 years of professional fundraising experience. And then some of those basic things that go with it. So we put together a timeline for all of this, and we put together the specifics of what we're asking for. DSL would like to put this out through Oregon Buys, which is the statewide procurement system, because they are contractors, and it just needs to be at that level. So this one and the communications consultant would go at that level. And I think the timeline is, we put criteria for how we'll be evaluating, and it might be at the front of the document. I wanted to show you the timeline. The announcement would go out tomorrow. Deadline for questions would be the 21st. Proposal due date would be August 6th. So we're going to give people a month to respond. Intent to award on September 1st. Project start date on October 1st. And this would run for a little over a year to start pulling all this stuff together and building. The hope would be that it would gain a lot of steam and momentum, and we would potentially solicit interest from either builders or other entities to want to continue to support the development. And of course, as one brings in development funding, some of those funds can be used to support the position as well. So that's the idea of part of this. So any questions on the development fundraiser in this RFP that we are hoping to get out?
Thank you, Lisa.
Christine?
Can you scroll back to the schedule that you just had there?
Yes.
And you said the project was a little over a year. So should the completion be December 1st, 2024? Or
Yes, it is. That is a typo. And that is a big one. And I need to get back to DSL on that. Okay.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the builders funding is for 3 years. And we kind of front loaded it with more expenses in year one, recognizing that a success will allow us to self-fund an ongoing position. So it kind of dissipate the amount of funding coming from the foundation will dissipate over time.
Christine,
Has DSL ever had this kind of a contract before? Just kind of curious.
I don't believe so. That a state agency would have a development person, but I cannot answer that with 100% certainty.
I just wondered if that's a contractor, they have complete, I mean, what's the sequence of permissions and, you know, I'm just curious about how the oversight would be provided as to what contacts are appropriate, what grants and all that kind of stuff. Just curious if you can enlighten us a little about your conversations regarding that.
Laura, do you want to take that one?
Sure. The funding from the foundation has development director and a communications director and gap analysis. And this is kind of the rub with the executive director position. I don't have the bandwidth to manage these contractors. So it also includes Lisa's time as an operational program manager. So in as much as Lisa has demonstrated she is an effective communicator with the board, and the board can give Lisa direction, Lisa will be the one managing the contractees directly. And she has an excellent relationship with the department. And so I would presume that any hiccups, and I'm sure there may be some along the way, we have yet to find any program that doesn't, she'll be able to work those out and bring them to the board if needed. So Lisa will be the person directly overseeing them at our direction.
Yes. Just to follow up on that, I'm just curious what I mean, I can imagine fundraising could get into some interesting areas with respect to the state and a state contract. Has there been any consultation on that issue with, I'm not sure where, and I don't know that you want to daylight it too much either to bring up issues that may not be real, but I'm just curious if there have been any explorations of potential issues.
It mostly has to do with budget limitation more than anything.
Okay.
So as long as these people are credited and they've got great reputations and, you know, we do a good vetting process, which I'm pretty confident we'll do after the 2 rounds of grant funding for $2 million that we've done. The biggest piece of this is working really closely with DSL so that they know who's being reached out to, what's being asked, how much we're asking for, what the grant deadlines are, and how those align with legislative sessions and budget limitation. Those are going to be the key things. So I think we're going to be okay as long as we work directly with Jean Straight and Michelle at DSL. And we've already been in contact. We did have a meeting already with legislative fiscal folks.
Okay.
We did that last month. And we talked directly with the lead legislative LFO officer that deals with DSL. It was a great conversation. So we all talked about the need for us to just be fully in the loop as this person comes aboard and starts doing things. And of course, Laura and I are in constant communication. So I'm going to err on the side of this might be a hiccup more than anything.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciated hearing the consultations that have been done.
Thank you. This is Steve. Just one other quick question. And maybe the answer to this is nothing and no, but I'm wondering to what extent this person or this position will interact with the Oregon Community Foundation and how that dynamic works. So that's, we had to do some administrative background work to get that process set up as a fiscal agent to receive philanthropic funding. And so is that is that structure and that mechanism in place to facilitate what we're talking about here? Or, and is there, just wanting to make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed with respect to how that process works with OCF acting as the fiscal agent for the trust?
Laura, do you want to hit that first?
I think that's an excellent point, and I didn't see it explicitly mentioned in the bullet list of actions or deliver. What was that list of when it said what the scope of work is? Perhaps we could make it more explicit there so that we make sure that that introduction is seamless, because yes, this person will need to work closely with OCF if any funds want to be directed in a philanthropic charitable way.
Definitely. All right. The next one, let me see if I need to refresh the screen on this. Are you guys seeing the communications consultant one now? Okay. So this one was done for communications consultant, very same schedule, but of course, different scope of work. So the whole idea is that this person would develop an outreach and communications plan. And they wouldn't build it in a vacuum. They build it around Oregon's ocean community as it exists now. And we'll be really stressing that as we work with them. We don't want to create its own thing, but we want to acknowledge what's been done with Oregon Marine Reserves and all of these other entities that are already reaching out and communicating about Oregon's ocean. But this will have a specific science and research piece to it. But the idea is for them to develop this communications plan, link up with Pathways Collaborative and the work that they've done and incorporate all that work into this, develop and maintain a media list, produce editorial content, news releases. You know, right now I've been doing the news releases. I just happen to have a background in that, so I can do it, but it'd be great to have a little bit of help with somebody else that routinely does that sort of thing. And maybe even expand some of our communication through social media, e-blasts, those kinds of things. Maybe providing some content for the website. Compiling information on OOST-funded projects. Like Laura has always said, we don't want to interpret the science that the projects that OOST is funding is doing, but we could compile the information they provide us on their project progress, et cetera, and really start hammering the website with that, so that our website is not just about what we funded, but what does it mean? What did we learn? How is it being used? Those are the kinds of things a good communications contractor can do for us. Really helping us with our brand, in working really closely with the fundraiser too, right? So those two are going to really be working in sync. So this is a pretty exciting one. Like I said, same schedule in terms of hiring, bringing the contractor on. This one would also go out through Oregon Buys, which is the state contracting system. They would be hired by DSL contract, just like my contract is. So DSL would then have 3 contracts under the OOST hood, mine, the development fundraiser, and the communications contractor. Any questions on this one?
I just add, Lisa, again, like the kind of rollout of this over the 3-year funding window that we have from the foundation is actually a little bit lighter up front. And that's because we think that the real opportunity for communication is going to come after the Science Summit. And we have that refreshed view of what Oregon science needs are and the power of the people who were there to create that. And really, in my mind, this person is doing what I think Representative Gomberg and Charlie Plyban both talked about in the opening remarks this afternoon, is just really highlighting the importance of our work to the state and to the region. And while the development director is going to be out there, pounding the pavement from DC to Salem and beyond, this person's going to be developing those messages, those one-pagers, the graphics, the visuals, the things that make that person's job a little bit easier, because often those two things don't always go hand in hand, and we didn't want to assume that we could find a development director that was also a graphic designer. So this is a much smaller contract than development director. It's really about a third of that. So it's a smaller component, but a critical piece.
Other questions or comments? Okay, the last one I will share with you then, and really quickly, I'll make this bigger for you guys. So this is an RFP that we would do through our own, not through DSL. This is one we would do just like our other grants for ocean acidification and hypoxia and near shore. Because it's not a contracting position, it's just a grant that we can put out there. So this is to do the inventory that is described in your action plan, and it is to produce a state of the science report that tees up a nice bucket of information for the summit that you will be having. And so the timeline for this is, I've got that in here. It basically goes out the door tomorrow, just like everything else, if you approve it. Let me scroll back up. I went too fast. So this entity would research, inventory, and compile entities conducting ocean and coastal science policy research in Oregon, and to produce a state of the science report that is an inventory of that science policy and research in Oregon, as well as a summary of existing and emerging projected research and data needs. So those of you that participated in the 2016 summit, we actually vetted what some of those existing and emerging research needs are. So what we want to do is come into the summit with this report, and we still want to vet it with all of the summit attendees that come to the summit this fall. But this gives us some rich background information to look at and say, yep, that's spot on, or no, this is really an emerging priority that is not included in this report. We need to make it front and center and have those kinds of rich discussions. So we anticipate them using a combination of surveys, interviews, directories, data sets, things they use in social network methodologies like snowball sampling, to create and compile that inventory and to get us that information about what people think are the current existing and emerging ocean and coastal research and data needs. So that's what this one is about. And we even put in here what we thought some metrics we would use to evaluate the success of the project, so that people will understand if they bid on this, this is what we want out of it. So we've got a pretty clear listing. If they want to add value to that, they can, but we at least want them to provide this. And then we put in a little bit more detail there. In terms of the qualifications, it's pretty standard. And we just put in how we would be evaluating it. Again, pretty similar to how we've done our other work. So here's the schedule for this. Put it out tomorrow if you approve. Questions the 21st, due date the 6th. So same as, and this again is another, that's the 24th. So obviously before these go out, we'll make sure that those get corrected. So that's what we've got. Any questions or comments, Christina?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. This is
That
really
is the 23rd. Sorry about that.
very exciting. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
So maybe I missed it, but when you're releasing it tomorrow, what is your distribution list? Who gets notices for not just this RFP, but also for the other positions that we're recruiting for?
For the positions, they will go statewide, so they'll go out over a bunch of state lists through Oregon Buys, which reaches any and everyone that contracts with the state of Oregon. It's pretty extensive. What we'll also do, though, is what we did with the at least for this one, for the inventory and the state of the science report, we'll send that out through the networks that we sent out the first 2 grant funding proposals, the RFPs, because those are people that work in and around the ocean and coastal research community. So we'll get that out through that way. In terms of the first 2 positions, in addition to Oregon Buys, which is all statewide contracting, that also goes out nationally through state lists. And I'm also going to send the fundraising one directly to some national fundraising organizations. They put those out through their job lists. And the same will be said for the communications consultant as well. There are national organizations that are nationally accredited. It'll go out through those because we really want somebody that's got really good experience in communications and development first, and then ocean issues second. It's really the skill sets you're looking for, not the topic initially, and then the topic is secondary.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm curious, can you go back to the list of qualifications for the inventory piece? And the reason I ask that is I think this is a great project to help build capacity in the state for people working in ocean science. This is not a gap analysis where an individual is required to apply some acumen to help us understand what are the problems we need to solve. It's really an inventory. Maybe scroll down a little bit so we can see the, oh, okay, that's all there is. Got it. So when I read this, I'm just wondering if I just want to be sure that it's not too limiting to a, maybe a newly graduated student with an interest in marine science here. It doesn't seem to me that it really is. I think it's a good solid list of communications. Would you agree with that, Lisa? Or do you think that we are seeking a higher level than maybe what I'm talking about?
No, I agree. And we had talked about whether this would be a gap analysis. I think where the gap analysis is going to occur is at the summit.
Right.
That's where we're going to ask people with a ton of experience in these issues to say, okay, here's a report. Now, bring all your scientific expertise, experience, knowledge, and understanding of Oregon's coastal issues and use this information. And let's come out of that summit with these are the highest priority ocean and coastal research issues that the OOST should be going after funding for to support projects. So there isn't going to be a gap analysis here. These individuals or individual is just going to be compiling information.
This is the exact kind of little contract I would have taken on as a graduate student when I was at OSU. So just seeing that there's just a bachelor's degree requirement, I think graduate students would be really good, and maybe Karina can help us get this out through those channels as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think several of us probably have networks that might be good to redistribute. So call on us, I guess, to rebroadcast.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I'll make sure you guys all get copies of these.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Chair Anderson. I think Chair Anderson makes a good point that this is more of an inventory than a gap analysis, and I think that's an important distinction to make up front. I also am happy to see the word policy in there, wedged in between science and research, because I think that is that brings in a different set of entities that maybe that I think are important for this overall discussion and important for the OOST discussion at the summit. But that may not, and we'll make sure that this inventory includes group that may not otherwise have been included if it was just science and research. So that policy component, I think, is compelling to me. So just wanted to just wanted to recognize that. And thank you again, Lisa, for pulling these together so quickly.
Yeah, you bet. And I did want to point out, this is not a typo on this one. We want the work to be done before the summit. So this is correct. I think what happened is this schedule got copied onto the other two. So we want this done by December 1st so that we have it for the summit. And so Laura Leaf asked in the chat box, can you remind me when the summit is? We'll be talking about that, Leaf, in a few minutes.
Spoiler alert, it's December.
Thank you.
Or after
In case you have
December
to
1st.
drop off. Yeah, that's our intention. And actually, Karina brought forth something that we should amend, Lisa, on page 12 of the action plan, where we're summarizing in the boxes. I think it was contemplated to have, so I'm looking at A1, thematic areas and strategies, conduct a inventory/gap analysis. It's really the inventory for the first step in October, and the gap analysis can be moved down to December.
That would-
A.
Got it.
Yes, also in the metric then as well.
All right. And I will make sure that this make change above, so I don't forget that, because it needs to happen in the body of the text too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So if we move forward with these, we'll be able to demonstrate to builders and others that we get these out the door fairly quickly and hopefully get these folks on board. Christine?
Lisa, with that in mind, the editing needs to go to all of those bullet points for the kind of things that we changed in the text, such as California Current and some of those other issues. So
Yes.
I think all that needs to be done. Thank you.
You bet. Well, Laura, I think we are done with all the RFPs. If you want to talk about the date, location, participants, sponsors, and other specifics for the summit.
Sure, and I do want to keep us to our scheduled public comment time in 7 minutes. So I don't think there's a lot here other than we are intending to have it in Newport at the Marine Studies Gladys
Valley Marine Studies Building.
Gladys Valley Marine Studies Building, December, probably early December. I would expect that this inventory is going to provide us with a plethora of participants in the range of 50 or 60. Would not surprise me. We have one sponsor already, and Oregon Community Foundation is working with us to see if we can leverage some of their contacts for additional sponsors. And then we as board members can reach out to any of our respective organizations. Lisa and I quickly put together a one-pager that can give a potential sponsor some more information. And so we can share that with you all. Anything else on that I missed?
Better confirm availability
Confirm availability
of the venue.
location. Or else we'll be back at the Embarcadero.
Yeah, no.
That was small.
It was small.
Yeah, time is chugging on. So yeah, that's that. And then we had also identified the need to put together a JEDI advisory committee, and thought this might be a good opportunity if the board wanted to have any discussion about criteria that we would look for in asking for participation. And it looks like Lisa's queued up some content for us. Do you want to walk us through that, Lisa?
Yeah, just a reminder, you know, our discussion in April was a really good one, and we talked about can OOST remove any barriers and make it a welcoming organization in terms of entities that would consider applying for one of our grant projects? And what barriers might we have to knock down in order for that to happen, to make sure we provide equal access to resources and opportunities, and really to cultivate an environment where everyone feels inclusive and feels like they could apply for a grant and do a research project on behalf of the state of Oregon and its ocean and coast. So that's the whole idea for this committee. I also wanted to share with you a really cool document. And Karina, I know, is probably familiar with this. And it landed on my other screen and looks like it's, let me see if I can't grab this a different way. It got stuck on my other screen. Here we go. Too many screens. Let me share, new share. So this is not that we want to mimic this, but it's just a model. And I love looking at models because it helps you from reinventing the wheel. But the Coastal Conservancy of California produced this document, and it's their JEDI guidelines. They adopted them in 2020, and it kind of sets the framework for how they want to think about themselves in JEDI, and what that nexus is with their organization, which is pretty cool. And so they developed some guidelines for partnerships, funding, community engagement, Coastal Conservancy staff and board, accountability and transparency. So there's some really cool models out there. And just wanted to point that out, that this committee could help advise on those kinds of things and work with the board to produce that framework and thinking.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for the overview. There are certainly many organizations that have developed frameworks that might be worth looking at. Certainly Oregon Sea Grant and the National Sea Grant Program have also designed frameworks. So I think there's a variety of organizations we could look to for some inspiration, depending on what it is we're trying to achieve with this committee exactly. Or this advisory committee. I also wanted to bring up that I think we might want to reconsider the acronym that we're using. The acronym JEDI has been subject of some controversy about what it symbolizes relative to the purpose of this kind of a committee. And we might, I would recommend that we reconsider the precise acronym.
Do you have a recommendation?
Well, I mean, something that we could discuss further, I think. I'm not going to put something on the table, but I know that we moved at the National Sea Grant moved towards DEI-JA. We also included accessibility as so the names mean something and they have symbolism associated. JEDI in particular has a symbolism associated with it, which may not be the best. Yeah.
Christine.
Yeah, I think this is a great area to begin to incorporate in all of these discussions. And it brings into mind one thing I think I had commented to Lisa about, that in our science and understand and communication tools, we are not putting economics into some of the components, and understanding economics as a compartment that is connected to ocean conditions and everything is, I think that's going to be one of the things that we need to be including in our broad brush of what are some of the aspects that are involved in ocean and coastal and shoreline resources and understanding. So
thanks, Christine. Laura, it is 2:40, so if you wanted to do public comment, we could get back to this to finish it up.
Yes, I would like to go ahead and just pause the discussion so that we can make for public comment. Lisa, if you could help from your side, if any members on the Zoom call would write their names in the chat. Actually, we can see the chat bar if you stop your screen share temporarily, then our chat bar will come back. There we go. So if you want to type your name in the chat, and I will ask our one member in the audience here, did you sign up for public comment, Jenny? Okay, you said no. All right, great. So we have none in the room. Is there anyone on the call that would like to give comment? Okay. Seeing none, we can then resume our conversation where we were.
Yeah, so it's really up to the board on how you want to proceed. It sounds like I'm not sure in terms of DSL's public meetings laws, if there could be a subcommittee of board members that could work on crafting something to bring back to the full board. What's your thoughts on how all of you would like to take next steps in terms of reconsidering the acronym and thinking about a framework and building this?
Well, recognizing that we don't meet again until October as a full board, it seems like there's potentially time between now and then. I feel inclined to call on one of our board members to really help support this, and it would be Dr. Moffat, because I know that her research and her academic background has a lot that we could benefit from for this process. I'm wondering if we could ask, if I could ask if she would be willing to lead a committee to and then coordinate time and maybe work with you, Lisa, on making sure that we have our public meeting law announcements in place if need be. Christine, would you be?
Yeah, I'd certainly was going to volunteer for engaging in any case, but yeah, I guess the public meeting laws are things that I know if we're going to make a subcommittee, or whether if it's not an official meeting, I think we're okay. We can caucus. That's my interpretation of that.
Yeah, so I think our limitation is if we are in quorum. So if it is you and one other voting member and other members that could be not from the board, you could invite other people with expertise in this matter. I think that we would be just fine.
Well, we certainly have a number of resources, particularly within the Sea Grant and other places. So I think we could set something up, as long as whatever we set up, we kind of run by Lisa to make sure we're in line.
Yes, and not to put anybody else on the spot, perhaps other board members, if you have an interest, you could send a message to Christine and let her know of your interest, and we'll try to, and if we have more, if it is going to be more than 2 board members, then we might need to reconsider just the timeline and how we roll out those meetings. But I think one of the things that I would see as a potential great first outcome of that work, Christine, would be somewhat of a one-pager that could explain to a prospective committee member what the expectations would be of them, what we're trying to achieve, and how their input would be integrated into our process. That and also a list of potential candidates that we could reach out to. Does that sound reasonable? Any other key first steps? Okay. And Lisa's done a great job of looking at some of the existing documents out there. And I know, Christine, you have a lot of probably have a lot of knowledge of others as well. So we'll try to use some others' experience to help us build our own.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Christine.
Yes, thank you, Christine.
So Laura, I've got 4 action items from the meeting to confirm the availability of the Gladys Valley Marine Study Building for the summit, finalize the strategic plan, finalize the 3 RFPs and get them out the door, and then launch what we can just for now call the diversity committee until it gets ultimately named, and get some progress going on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. And our OAH Jenny, what was your last name, Jenny? Jenny Kester will work towards putting together a subgroup to work to just to take a good look at the OAH communications, where we're at and what the expectations are for that work.
Great, thanks for that.
I mean, if you.
We could mention, I guess that just leaves us with 12 minutes. I love it when we're on time for any member updates or other business. Karina and I have one, and I'm just going to pull up some notes that I had taken on this meeting really quickly. So give me just one moment. Karina was able to schedule a call for us with the director of the California Ocean Science Trust. And so, yeah, we were on a Zoom. I can't find the notes. Karina, what did we talk about?
Well, I think it was just an opportunity to compare notes with a similar organization, sort of boundary spanning organization with a mandate from legislative basis. Different scope, scale, sort of mission to some extent, but some similarities in the issues around fundraising, issues around sort of getting an action plan underway, staffing, that kind of thing. And really sort of finding their identity. So it was more a director to director kind of conversation, if you will, just to understand what the similarities and differences might be between the organizations, but also to look for opportunities to support each other, particularly in efforts that might be benefit from a more regional collaboration. I think we just opened the door to ongoing conversation. Should that be useful?
Yeah.
Does that sound about?
Yes, all of that. And also, I think my thought was, as we're moving forward with our fundraising and our development specialists that we're bringing on board, that at some point we may bring that person in on that conversation to see if there is potential, particularly when looking at federal funding, larger pockets of federal funding for this work, that a multi-state approach might be very worthwhile.
Right. And just full disclosure, I also serve on the board of the California Ocean Science Trust still. So that was it was just easy for me to set up that call. So.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It was great.
It's great to hear. Thanks for having that discussion.
Christina or Christine from online, anything further from either one of you?
No, thank you. I don't have anything else to add, but thank you for a great meeting.
I'm glad you were able to join us from wherever out there you're enjoying your summer vacation. I tried to encourage Christina just to take the vacation, but she said, if I have service, I will call in. So I hope that that worked out well for you.
Yes, thank you. I found one little spot that I could sit in for 3 hours and before we keep going on the road. So it worked out just fine. I really appreciate the discussion and all your work, Lisa. And so I'm glad I was able to participate today.
This is my announcement. Can you see what I'm?
Cool, yes.
Because Susan Chambers is on our call right now, and she did this. This is our poster for the Music Fest that is starting very soon on the 15th. So I just had to shout out to this is Odysseus, and he is on a quest of finding a place in Oregon that might be suitable for a new life. So I had to share that with y'all.
Thanks, Christine, that's a great way to wrap up here. Are we good? Okay, all right, great. Well, thank you all for a great meeting. I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 2:52. We'll see you all in October, if not sooner.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.